Welcome to About Face Theatre presents 5 Questions With, and today's guest, Sarah Rasmussen. Sarah is a director and the current artistic director of the McCarter Theatre in Princeton, New Jersey. She started her first theatre company at the age of 14 in her hometown in South Dakota. She's the former artistic director of the Jungle Theatre in Minneapolis, where she commissioned, produced, and directed new work. And she also was previously the head of the MFA directing program at the University of Texas, Austin. Her other directorial credits include work at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the Guthrie, Dallas Theatre Center, and the Actors Theater of Louisville, while she has been highly involved in the development of new work at places like the Lark, the Playwrights Center, and the O'Neill, among others. Her accolades include being named the Star Tribune's Artist of the Year, a Minnesota Theatre Award, an Ivey, and a Princess Grace Award, as well as Drama League and Fulbright fellowships. Sarah, you're very welcome.
Thanks for having me. Great to visit with you.
Yeah, our pleasure. So Sarah, we're gonna jump straight in. The first question is, what play or experience first got you into theater? We know you started young.
Well, I grew up in a small town in South Dakota that didn't really have live performing arts in that sort of traditional theater sense. So I think theater was a way to continue to sort of, play dress up with my friends after school. And as I think went from the sort of preteen to teenage years, my mom was an English teacher, and I was really lucky that she believed in taking us kids to see live art. So she took me to, we stood in the rush line at the Guthrie Theater when Garland Wright was the artistic director there. And I saw an As You Like It that was starring Elizabeth Marvel and Bill Camp when they were right out of drama school. It was incredible. And Garland Wright, for folks watching, if you don't know Garland's work, please look him up. There's a beautiful new book about him called Painting the Stage. He was an incredible, he started as a painter, a visual artist, then became a director, and his work was so visually arresting. And on that big Guthrie thrust stage, this would have been in the late 90s, just incredible. And I think I also had a lot of visual art inclinations as a kid, but to see that come to life in such a dimensional way with storytelling just really spoke to me. And I had just a profound and overwhelming feeling that I wanted to direct plays and more specifically be an artistic director. And at the time, as a teenage girl, I sat there and sort of a voice came to me and said, like, this is what you should do. And I felt this sort of like, I want to be the first female artistic director of this theater, which, I never thought that job would still be available at this point. But I think I just feel I feel lucky that that I felt that strong and early inclination. And then I felt very unlucky at the time in a sort of petulant teenage way to be like, oh, but I live in this town where there's no theater. Like, how will I? And I think that wall actually was one of probably the greatest blessings in my life, because I just had to figure out how to do it, which I think is a lot of directing. You can sort of teach directing, but the only way you ever learn it is by doing it and learning what your own voice or your own style sounds like in any given room. So I feel like I still actually today, running a larger company, it's all sort of a continuation of, I think, those early impulses to gather people and essentially give them a gift, which I think is, maybe that sounds a little bit simplistic, but I think more and more I go back to, like, why did I want to do this in the first place? I think especially in these very fraught times, to get back to sort of the essentials of what is at the heart of this.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well,
yeah.
Certainly feels like, Sarah, you have achieved much of your dream anyway.
Oh, it's always then the dream just it always moves to something else. But yeah, it does feel very familiar in a way to now be at McCarter, and in an unfamiliar time. There is something that feels like, oh, this is grounding. This is what I had hoped to do, and I feel very fortunate to be doing it.
Yeah, very cool.
Okay, so Sarah, so you have obviously worked on a lot of new plays. You've worked on a lot of plays overall, like classics and things, and more established titles too. So putting you on the spot, what's one great play that you love and why?
Oh, great question. Well, I always think of any play sort of as a new play, whether it's classic or, because we're doing it now, right? So I never tired of being in rehearsal for Sarah Delap's The Wolves. I think that is an extraordinary play. And every time I worked on it, it would sneak up on me because it seems so simple, right? That we just have these slice of life scenes. It's about 90 minutes of the lives of these girls on the soccer, warming up basically for their soccer team. But it really always struck me that at the beginning of that play, even when I'd spent months with it, I felt like I can't tell one from the other. I don't know these girls. But in 90 minutes, I feel like I know them so deeply and care and feel very invested in their whole larger world. And I just think that alchemy as a playwright is just extraordinary. And I think I'm interested more and more in transformation on stage, but transformation that feels very earned, and how we grab audience interest and increase it and create those moments of accumulative change that we feel different when we leave. And maybe it's just that I'm so deeply craving some kind of momentum in our lives, right? that we go that we get somewhere. But I do feel like that it's extraordinary because it's not it doesn't pander to an audience, it challenges an audience, her writing, but it's really profound. It's a piece I've done it twice and I'd love to revisit it again because I just feel like it continues to amaze me.
Fantastic.
That's great.
That's such a great play.
Yeah.
So kinetic too. I love that there's a sort of element of chance in it. I think we love watching sports because we don't know what's going to happen. And I think as a director, I'm always after a bit of that feeling when possible in a play of like, how do we feel like, this is the choose your own adventure part,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's such an energy. It's very kind of visceral in that way. Yeah. That way. So Sarah, can you tell us about a time in your theater life where something turned out differently than you expected it to?
Yes, the last 18 months of my life. I got this job. I was offered this job in early February of 2020. No, mid-February. Somewhere in February of 2020. So right, weeks before the pandemic started. And nothing has been what I thought it would be. It's especially strange as a leader to come into a new place. It's a time of great change in the organization. I'm taking over for an incredible artistic director, Emily Mann, who'd been here for 30 years. Our director of special programming, who's now retiring, has been here for nearly 60 years. So the organization, they weren't founders, but they might, in a cultural imagination, in a sense, they were, because they really founded an era here. So that's a lot of change. And then also with the pandemic, and to come in and be a leader on Zoom was really challenging. I would have told you, like, pre-pandemic, I think if there's one thing I can do, it's read the room, and all of a sudden there was no room anymore. It's just sort of, it was really disorienting in so many ways. And so I think, nothing has gone exactly what the way I would have envisioned it to go pre-pandemic, but I think we have, we've learned a lot as a team. We talk about, like, oh, can you imagine, like, once we get back to just the normal problems of theater, like, we're gonna, it's gonna feel so easy. We play a game. It was like so quaint to remember what used to be a problem in tech pre. It's like, ha, how quaint, that we used to stress out about those things. So we've done a lot of strategic planning, a lot of visioning for the organization, a lot of anti-racism work, a lot of team build, like just using the time, kind of prioritizing things that would have been priorities, but in the scope of doing, continuing to do shows, we maybe would not have all stopped and reassessed in quite the same way. So I think there are silver linings. It's just, it's been a murky time, definitely, in the last 18 months.
Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely. Okay, so Sarah, as we were mentioning, you've been involved in the theater since you were a teenager. So what is it that keeps you coming back to the theater? What moves you? What excites you about theater?
Such a great question. I think for me, it is that sense of ritual and shared ritual, and that we can each have our own individual experience, but that we're also having a collective experience. is profound to me. It's very simple, right? It's very ancient, and it's also very very profound. I think another thing that keeps me coming back is just literally the energy that it gives me, and I hadn't fully appreciated that until I was denied it for quite some time in the pandemic, and to be back in rehearsal, to be back with artists, it truly I think feeds my soul and gives me a sense of meaning, and it's something I hope to impart in a non-didactic way to an audience. I'm really interested in pieces that don't preach or necessarily have a moral of a story, but that give us a collective experience. More and more, I'm interested in pieces that have music, because I think music does that for us. We can all enter into it in our own way. I'm also interested in comedy and laughter. And I think in these times when we all feel a real responsiveness to work that really matters and asks hard questions, it's also important for me to think about, it's also okay to laugh as we ask hard questions. It's okay to find joy. It's okay to move and feel, energized. And I think that's something we're talking a lot about as a company, of like, what does it mean to do anti-racist comedy? What does it mean to do, whose voices haven't been heard in those spheres that also are, joyful and entertaining as well. So they feel like really, it feels like powerful questions to be driving us forward right now.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Very much so.
yeah, really cool. Okay. So you talked a little bit about reading the room. I don't know if that's something you learned in theater, but I'm interested in any skills that you may have acquired throughout theater that you find useful in the rest of your life.
That's a really great question. I think for me, it is that that experience of just being in a very empathetic space and a space that prioritizes people's lived experience, and a space that allows for talking about emotion and shared experience and individual experience. And so I think something I've learned, perhaps the hard way sometimes in leadership, as I moved from being a freelance director into running an organization, and an organization with a board. And at first, I remember when I first started in Minneapolis, feeling like, oh, okay, it's my first board meeting. I need to speak board language. Like boards tend to have a fair amount of people from the corporate world on them, and sort of feeling like okay, I need to find my way into that language. And more, I've learned. I think to bring the language of poetry and of theater into spaces that are perhaps more corporate or more, and I still am navigating that, but I think that it is something we talk a lot about here, as we redid a lot of re-looked at a lot of strategic planning stuff, is how much mission statements can start to gravitate towards the same language. And there's a sameness or a sort of safety around language, I think, that happens, and for all good intents, but remembering that we are from the lineage of poets and songwriters, and how do we use the language that actually activates us and activates others in a sort of embodied sense. So that's a sort of circuitous way to say I think I have learned some, and am still learning how to bring more of the language of poetry into our increasingly corporate Zoom outlook.
Yeah. True. Oh, beautiful.
Well, Sarah, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much. As a bonus question, can you tell us anything about what you're working on at the moment?
I can. Next up, I'm going to direct a new musical that I'm just deeply enamored with, called Ride the Cyclone. And it is a really visually stunning comedy about death. And it's I think in some ways about how we experience grief, and how we move through grief and move on through grief. And it's really funny. It's got a very Canadian dark sense of humor, and I think for me, I'm excited about it in this time, because it acknowledges the of what we've all been through to some degree. And I think we need that, because we need to have a space to feel those feelings. But then also, like I said, to use laughter and to use, emotion to hopefully ask some questions around like, but what does make a life well lived? And when we leave the theater, I sort of always want people to leave the theater and either, go propose to someone or go break up with someone or call their mom and tell them like, I want to, have people feel like, yes, I leave with some kind of impetus to maybe see my life with a little bit more vividness or a little bit more possibility. So that's maybe more than you needed to know about my desire for more vividness and possibility.
No, I love it. Bring it on.
Fantastic.
So Sarah, thank you so very much for being with us. We so appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Take care. Stay healthy, and thanks again.
Thanks, you too.
Cheers.
And thank you to the audience for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, please like below, follow AboutFACE, and share, because we believe theater makes life better. See you next time on AboutFACE Theater Presents 5 Questions With.
If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and share. Thanks for watching.